So, Peter, thank you so much for taking time today and providing us with your leadership perspectives on how WBCSD is working with businesses to build forward better societies. I'm looking to have a nice conversation with you, and so I have a few questions. Let me start with the first one. So, we live in a complex and really ever-changing world, and business as usual is just not going to cut it. Is business being successful at adapting to this challenge, and how will this derive value for society and our planet?
Yeah, Bill, it's great to talk to you, and I'm sorry we can't be in the same room today. So I was looking forward to meet all the North American members, but here we are on video. I think business is getting ready to deal with the challenges. I think the business was gearing up to this. So I would say at the end of the year, early of this year, when in the World Economic Forum, the Global Risk Report came out, where for the first time in the history, the top 5 risks were identified as environmental risks. Stakeholder capitalism was the theme of that particular conference. Businesses from around the world were engaged in it. I think recent events, the COVID crisis that has struck globally, that has locked down economies and businesses everywhere. Your country is unfortunately no exception to that. And then the recent social tensions that we've seen pop up everywhere, not in the least in North America, will only amplify the need to now really get on top of the environmental and the social risks. I think the license to operate from businesses is what is at stake now. And it's really time that we move the actions up, that we really get business to focus on these topics, not by making more speeches, not by making more commitments. We've got plenty of those, but now fundamentally rethinking business models, the way we interact with our customers and all our other stakeholders.
That's fantastic. The investors in the investor community is certainly taking notice. And what we used to call non-financial disclosure is really now starting to become much more meaningful and material in the way investors are evaluating companies. And so what do you see as their role in their response and with this tsunami of future shocks and market disruptions ahead of us? Where does the investor community really play?
I think it's essential that capital markets and investors now become an integral part of this conversation. We've seen so many businesses making real incredible sustainability efforts. If you look at the quality of ESG disclosures that companies have been putting forward in recent years, has significantly improved. But up to now, very little of that effort has really been rewarded by capital markets. If anything, it's often seen as a distraction. I think what I now see is, it started with climate change, I would argue. The capital market is now really on top of climate change. When I talk to CFOs from around the world, they say the conversations they're having with their investors in their roadshows has radically changed on the topic of climate change. And again, I think COVID will make one thing crystal clear, is that we cannot deny environmental or social risks anymore. They have the power to completely shut down our economy, disrupt our supply chains, and in some cases even destroy the business models of our companies. So we have to be more transparent. At the same time, we need to make sure that capital markets look at that transparency and then begin to integrate it into their capital allocation and eventually their valuation models. We in the World Business Council have said for a long time, more sustainable businesses should attract a lower cost of capital. And that's not because we're the sustainability people who would be expected to make that case, but because if you are better in managing your ESG performance, your risk profile will be lower. And as such, the cost of capital should also be lower. And that's really the future that we're after. I see it happen, PRI bringing more than 3,000 signatories together around these themes. And I would expect some important development there in the coming months.
Right, and we've certainly seen the stock markets rewarding those companies that have put these essential plans in place.
So I think to that point, we've ranked and rated our North American members against the indices in North America, and they have outperformed more than 10% over the COVID period. So there's some real indication that better ESG managed companies get a reward already, but it needs to be more structural.
Exactly. Well, speaking of the pandemic and what COVID-19 has meant for shining a light on stakeholder capitalism, I know this is a term that really kind of emerged this year on the scene, and now we've got a global pandemic and societal unrest that's challenging the very core of it. And where do you see how this aligns with the business response as we build forward better in the decade ahead?
Yeah, I'm really happy to see that also in North America, stakeholder capitalism is taken more serious. At the end of last year, I think it was in November, the Business Roundtable, more than 180 CEOs signing the declaration that the days of pure shareholder capitalism are behind us. We should really try to serve all stakeholders. I don't think anyone, well, I know for a fact that anyone has not expected the deep disruption that the pandemic has brought. And if we're honest about it, is still bringing, because this is far from over. And if you listen to some of the experts, may well last another year before we have this thing under control. So this deep disruption, if you then look at the North American market, where there's now 40 million people unemployed, then begs the question, how stakeholder capitalist is that? And I think, again, mix the pandemic, the high levels of unemployment, the use of food banks that is shooting up, mix that with the current social tensions in your country. That makes for a very tricky type of environment where, like I said, the license to operate a business over the long run will be debated. And I think it makes it now really the time that it's one thing to get the CEOs to sign a declaration like they did, which is an important signal, both inside the companies as well as to the markets. But it is now really time to put it into action, to say, what are we going to do about the environmental stresses that we are part of and the social tensions that are all around us?
So let me take that a step further, and from a former CEO of a large corporation, what are, in your minds, to address these ills that we're seeing, the societal needs that are emerging, what does bold action look like in a business context, in your mind?
Yeah, I think you need to. It's always the same in my mind. I think business is going to be the most important force in the society that we have today to deal with the issues, both environmental as social. And why is that? Because business is the most agile organization form we have. On average, it has the best talents in the house. It has the money and the financial horsepower to make these changes. But it does require a different mindset. So it begins with understanding, where do you as a company have impact, both positive as well as negative, and what on the material issues are we going to do to implement change? And the other point is, where does a business, your business, depend on either the environment or on social? And in a country like the US, where the social tensions are now at peak levels, where there's real tricky questions to be answered, making statements about inclusion and diversity won't cut it anymore. What can you really do to make changes in your workforce tomorrow? Can we hire different types of people? Can we promote people? And not symbolic, but really systemic change that we need to now think through. And it's true that an individual company cannot be expected to solve all societal issues. But if the collective of businesses look at their material impacts and dependencies, then we can make an enormous change in society. We have to be honest, and it's a real plea, and hopefully you'll get to discuss that in some more detail today. When it comes to environmental pressures, most companies, and certainly the ones who are involved in WBCSD, already have a pretty clear agenda on what are the topics we need to address, what are the technologies or the business model changes that we need to think through. So the E in the ESG is pretty much covered. We can do more, we need to go faster, but we know the agenda. The S is underdeveloped. Often we don't really even know what our impacts or dependencies are, let alone what the solutions could be. And I really think that that's the area where in the next 2-3 years, we need to see massive innovation and real action now coming from businesses.
Well, thank you for amplifying what will be the theme of our second session today. So with Joel McCower and company really helping us to get at that. Look, we're getting to the end of our few minutes here. So last question for you, Peter. Perhaps just a few thoughts on what this all means to WBCSD's success definition. You know, what are our priorities as an organization together with our members going to be going forward, and what are we doing really to strengthen how our members are going to respond to these very, very deep challenges that we're trying to address?
Yeah, I think fundamentally the role of an organization like WBCSD is to help companies understand, shape the agenda, and then develop solutions that eventually companies will have to implement into their own operations. So what we've been doing over the last few months is structurally looking at what is our value proposition to members, what is success going to look like, and what do we need to do in our agenda in terms of offering of projects to really help companies make the change. Now, and I've said in Lisbon last year during the council meeting and in many of the speeches since, we need to simplify sustainability. It's becoming too complex. It's about climate emergency, it's about nature loss, and it's about inequality. What can we do on each of these topics? In climate emergency, we've launched SOS 1.5. A tool that can help any company understand what is the road towards decarbonization. In biodiversity loss, there's massive food and nature programs underway. They will get focused. We will, and members will have seen this already in the survey that was sent out earlier this week. We will be scoping a project what is the social contract for the 21st century? And that has everything to do with what is business going to do about inequality, diversity, inclusion. And then the last thing is we will launch, and that's also in the member survey, what is stakeholder capitalism? How do you as a company move from shareholder to stakeholder capitalism? And how will it change the engagement with capital markets? So in the member survey, you see we have fundamentally rethought our work program. And I really hope, and you know, this meeting today would be a great opportunity for members to give feedback. I really hope to hear whether that resonates. And then next to that, we will have upgraded our membership criteria, because it's one thing to say we now need to get serious, we need to move into action. But it also means that the ask of companies that work with WBCSD needs to be strengthened and brought in line with what society expects.
That's great, Peter. Just incredible amount of work I know has gone on over the last few months while we've all been literally shacked up at home. And I know the team, I personally have seen a lot of that work, and I hope the members are going to react as we hope they will. So thank you again, Peter. It's been a great opportunity to get your insights. This is an unfortunate set of events in terms of having to do this whole event virtually, but you're here with us in spirit today, and I know your words meant a lot to those that would listen. And if we could have a round of applause virtually, I'm sure there would be one. But thank you very much for your time. Look forward to seeing you again.